Okay, hi everyone. Some of you know I know, and some of you I don't know. I think that what I described today as being about, it's an amalgamation of 5 or 6 sessions that we've done up to now. So we're going to cover things like personal branding, CV, networking, job interviews, LinkedIn. So it's going to be quite a whistle-stop tour. The process for today, if you don't know, I'll do a quick presentation and then open it up to questions. And as I say, if you are, particularly if you're going to ask a question, if you're in a position to put your camera on for that, brilliant. If you just don't want to ask a question, publicly, let's say, you're welcome to put it into the chat, as well. So, or instead of. So, with that said, we'll crack on, and I will give you the introductions. But feel free and take a note of any questions that crop up throughout, because I'm going to be doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour through this, and the questions can be about any subjects I cover, but they can also be about any things particularly relevant to you in your job search, if that's the situation you're in at the moment. All right. So let me just bring this up. Okay. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Steve. I'm the MD of Executive Connections. We've been established since 2014. We're a career coaching and outplacement company. So we work with people like yourself, and we also work with, HR as well, sometimes in unfortunate redundancy situations. So I've got a team of coaches spread around the UK, the US, Asia Pacific, and South Africa. And the whole emphasis of this series of events every Wednesday, same time, will be around areas that are going to help you in your job search. That's the whole point behind it. So even though, yes, we're a commercial business, what we like to do is to talk about areas that you can take away and you can put some things into action yourself. Some things I will refer to will be because many more people than actually attend the sessions will review the recordings. So, and also we get people view the recordings outside of our time zone here as well in the UK. So there will be some things I refer to in that context. So bear with me on that. So this is a round robin, as I say, regarding various things that we've covered, and I will cover these subjects pretty quickly. So make sure you jot down some notes. To me, excuse me. To me, the meat and the fun of these sessions is when we come back into the room and we're having a discussion. So that's where the questions, are very much welcomed. But I hope you'll take away something from this in any event. So first things first, then, elevator pitch. It's one subject, and I think that it's an area that everyone talks about. And I'm going to jump straight to the last piece of this, actually, that I believe that an elevator pitch needs to be structured in different ways for different situations. So you may have an elevator pitch that's a very short version. You may have something that's going to take maybe even up to a couple of minutes to actually deliver. So just make sure it's kind of structured, and we'll give you a little structure to follow on that. It's an ideal situation to help people gain confidence in you as well, because something around an elevator pitch could be something quite typical that's going to come up in a job interview situation. So a very typical thing might be, it might not happen as robotically as hi Steve, let's start this interview by tell me a bit about yourself. It might not happen exactly in that way. It might come out in various little questions throughout. But if you have something like this and you are asked this kind of question, then you can really nail that interview straight off, and it really is going to help you. So just think about the flow. And don't worry, there will be probably a few more bits of detail and text that I would normally have on a slide for this particular round robin affair, but we'll stick to it as it is. You will get the recording link as well, so you can review things at your leisure and you can make further notes and so on. But just get into that feeling. I always say to people as well, record yourself. You don't want the first time you're hearing yourself articulate this whole value proposition about you, your elevator pitch. You don't want the first time to be at an interview. When you first hear your voice, what am I saying? Where am I going with this? You know, you want to practice it, play it into your phone or some other recording device and get used to it. Own it, practice it, refine it, make it so it just sounds very, very, very natural. But keep it concise as well, because I think something that's really good about practicing your elevator pitch is that it will make sure that you know, are succinct, shall we say. Elevator pitch, done. So CV, I think you've got to think about it as still being it's a relevant tool. I know you've got a billion users on LinkedIn and so on, but CV is really, really important still. In a strategic leadership sense, think about a compelling executive or personal profile summary piece, maybe 6 to 8 to 10 lines, very personalized. Don't make it generic. That's going to kind of not really excite anybody. Make it very, very personal. The summary piece. So you can put at least one element in that summary piece that's significant. It could be a pounds or dollars sign. It could be a percentage of something you've achieved. It could equally be a human impact piece up there as well, if you're in that kind of world. So it's something that's going to attract the eye. That's the point. And the beauty of the pounds and dollar signs and the percentages are that they attract the eye really, really well. So, and that flows throughout, whether you're talking about your bullet points, the professional summary, you can certainly put these achievement-based pieces in there. And, you know, we've done surveys on this, and, you know, in terms of recruiters and headhunters, the eye does sort of, you know, flit towards pounds, dollars, percentages, euros. It does go in that direction. So think about it if it's possible to articulate your points in that way. Situation, task, action, result. There are other acronyms, you know, that you can use for sorting out your bullet points on your CV, but that's one that we use. It just keeps you grounded. I know there's one I've heard just very recently, actually, where there's another R on the end of STAR, which stands for review. So in other words, that was the result of that particular thing. And what I learned from that in addition was to apply this in other different situations, et cetera, et cetera. So, but certainly the standard STAR approach is something that people would recognize anyway, and it's something that keeps you grounded as well. Interestingly, use that format in an interview context as well. Think about that as grounding you in terms of when you're going through your interview process. So anyway, sticking to the CV, the achievements should have, you know, they should be just that. They should not be job description pieces. They should be achievements. So I heard a headhunter say to me once, if you've got any so what points, as they called them, then get rid of them. You know, every single point should be something that really says something about your career and says something about your achievements. And the rest of it really, really kind of just expands on that. Where I've highlighted a bit about tailoring it for each application, you'll know that there is already, you know, there's going to be 1,000,001 views about what makes a perfect CV. I don't believe there is such a thing. You've got to just be very flexible. We would advise you, and certainly we advise our clients, to get one CV that you can have as a benchmark. It's your standard CV. And incidentally, if you've had a significant career over time, you know, 2.5, 3 pages is absolutely fine as far as I'm concerned. Straight away, having said that, I had someone tell me last week that they had one particular recruiter that was insisting on 2 pages. So you will have to be flexible in terms of your approach. But just if you've got something that is really, really going to speak the best about you, you know, as far as possible as one document, it's going to be easier to tailor for each application. As I mentioned about LinkedIn, many people will not use LinkedIn to its fullest effect. They will focus on advertised roles. They will focus on just dealing with recruiters. Those are 2 great things to do. The other thing is enhancing your personal brand and thought leadership by being more proactive on LinkedIn. So putting out some articles, putting out some posts, following certain hashtag subjects that are relevant to your particular skill sets. Some of these are kind of a 101 checklist, really, but they're fairly obvious in terms of the profile picture. I say it's obvious, but, you know, make sure it's relatively up to date. You know, if you're going for an interview, whether it's through video or whether it's actual face to face, you want to sort of look like the person that's on your LinkedIn profile when you walk through the door or when the camera begins. Yes, it should be professional, but I think, you know, you can if you're good with it, if you're good with that kind of thing, you can get a good selfie will suffice as long as you are dressed appropriately for your own niche and your sector and so on. The headline, the piece I'm talking about there is the bit just under your photograph. So what some people will do there is literally put down a list of keywords to attract search results. So if you're a CIO or a chief financial officer, you might just put job titles that relate to that. Some people will also put down a piece that says helping organizations to fill in the blank, pretty much. So that you can trial that kind of approach. I'm a great believer in doing A/B sort of split tests on these kind of things, but it is the first place that the LinkedIn algorithm looks for keywords. So if you want to be found higher up the search results, that's the first position on your LinkedIn to really sort of think about. The summary, or the about section as it's now called, you can put, actually I forget the number of characters, but it's like a couple of thousand or so. You can really fill that section out. So don't think of it as just taking your profile section on your CV and pasting it in. You can be a bit more personable. You can tell a bit more of a story in that section. Yes, you still want to put achievements in, but you can make it a little bit more about you. You can throw in some of the things you do, you know, as hobbies and interests, maybe only a line or two, but you can sprinkle that stuff in. Whereas on the CV, maybe it's going to be a bit more, you know, a bit more straightforward or a bit more straight and serious, let's say. But there is a good amount of space you can use in that about section. To call it summary here, but it's now called the about section. Make sure that you use that up. Keyword rich, very, very important. You know, if you're being, I'll stick to CFO. If you're being, you know, you want to be found as a CFO, let's say, the more you can dot that phrase throughout your entire profile, not just the about section, the better. You've got to do it sensibly. You can't just do it as a, you know, putting it wherever you like. You've got to work it into a sentence. But even for a much older role, to give you an example, you could say, you know, in this role as financial controller, I reported to the CFO. Bang. That's another instance of CFO being in your profile. So whatever context it's in, LinkedIn will go and find it. Why bother with this? You want to get on page 1 of results when you're being searched for on LinkedIn. It's only one aspect of it. You know, the profile is just about having a profile. It's about what you then do with it and your own activity on LinkedIn that I think is really going to make a difference. Just one thing I'll pick out on there about recommendations. I mean, it's reciprocal. So, you know, you can, if you're happy enough to do recommendations for other people, sometimes people like to help and they will reciprocate. But there is a mechanism there to reach out to people and request a recommendation, as many people as you care to do that with virtually. So I would do that because it will populate your LinkedIn profile well. It will show people stories about colleagues and other, you know, sort of organizations you've worked with and sort of achievements you've had throughout your career. And it's quite an important section. There's a section which isn't on here at the moment, but it's just popped into my head about voluntary work that LinkedIn's algorithm does like the voluntary work section. So if you can edit your profile and work in a voluntary section of anything that you're doing at all in that area, then I think it will help you. But it moves on to your personal brand, because personal branding is all about how you present yourself and how you're going to differentiate yourself and articulate your value proposition. So it's that intersection between how you see yourself and how others are going to see you at the end of the day. But it needs to be consistent all the way through. So from your CV to your LinkedIn page to your own website, if you've got your own web portal, that's easy enough to do these days, gives you another calling card. Right through to how you talk to people, whether it be in informal or formal situations. That's whole piece about developing your brand. Again, you can come back to all this in the recordings. So I would say make sure that you sort of take a step back and just sort of think about this. The piece I want to pick out here is probably about telling a story. The best way of answering interview questions is telling a story, as long as it's got a point at the end of it. And the best way of describing the value you bring to the world is by telling a story or two about yourself, impacts you've had on people, impacts in a positive sense that you've had on organizations and in your role and so on. But I mentioned credibility. Yes, that's relevant. But I mentioned consistency, making sure it is the same across, any platforms that you're using. Everyone's got a brand these days, whether we like it or not. So it's just important to make sure that you're in control of what's going out there in that digital space. And kind of you can look at the recording afterwards and just sort of work through a process here. I'm always more than happy to have a chat to anyone on a one-to-one basis if you want to talk about any of the aspects, in this, about how you're going to accelerate your job search, questions about your CV, questions about LinkedIn, questions about your personal brand. All you have to do is book a one-to-one with me. The links will be in the chat section anyway. And just get a chat with me booked in. Networking is another really important area, really important area, and it's one of the things that's changed over time. I think probably most people I speak to will do less of the face-to-face networking now, although I know there are people who spend their time being present on different panels for panel discussions. It depends on your level, your seniority, what world you move in. But I think that think about that. Think about what you can do other than sitting behind your desk and actually networking on LinkedIn. There could be other things that you can be doing. Excuse me. In terms of maintaining a strong professional network, many people I speak to, if someone comes to me and says, look, Steve, I can see the writing on the wall in my role. I want to speak to you about possibly, working with you or working with your team. Often what they might say is that they've got a great network, or rather they had a great network. So there's a network that exists, but they haven't kind of stepped outside of that network for a long time. And the value, it applies to all sorts of things, the hidden jobs market, personal branding, getting more roles come across your sort of radar. It's often stepping just outside your network that helps you achieve that helps you get to those unadvertised jobs, those jobs you just knew nothing about, that all of a sudden come into your view because you've expanded your network out. So practical ways of doing that could also be to give yourself a target. Why not use a spreadsheet? Why not use a free CRM system for yourself that you can track what you're doing? It certainly would help with your recruiter conversations if you're having those as well. About what you're doing, about how you want to target yourself. Do you want to say, I want to connect to 20 new people every week and have meaningful conversations with X number of those? Think about that. Otherwise, it's easy to turn up, particularly if you're using social, and actually having similar kinds of activities each time, just clicking a bit of a like, clicking a bit of a share, clicking a bit of a, maybe you'll do a comment. All those things are great, but again, they will need that famous word, consistency, to be effective. This whole job search, it might even say it on one of these slides, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you've got to stay resilient. So these are all elements and ingredients that can help you along the way. I think that this has changed again over recent times, and I think people need to be on the third point down there, about it applying to video. Also, people need to be good on camera, or be as good as they can be on camera these days, because a lot of interviews will be held in this way. You need to know your way around Zoom. You need to know your way around Teams. You need to know your way around the fact that those apps have a habit of changing your default microphone and things like that. And just make sure you check these things before you're going onto a call. Yeah, voice of experience there, but I'm sure we've all had that kind of thing happen. So communication is important in all contexts. There will be, the face-to-face element as well. But I think that it's something just to bear in mind. It's 101 type stuff. It's basic stuff, but it's easy to forget in the heat of the moment. I would say that many people forget about things like active listening. They're listening just to wait for that person to stop so that they can begin talking. That's not active listening. It's really engaging in what the person is saying and being interested in that person. And it can also help, going one slide back to networking, it can also help in a networking context because, if someone says to me, I've said it many times, I don't like networking events. I never know what to say in them. What do I do? Face-to-face ones I'm talking about now. So asking people questions, that's the answer. Just ask people questions about themselves, their business, you know, how they got into their role, what they like about it, and so on and so on and so on. Asking questions is a real key thing. Now, I use this slide. I think I said right at the very outset that this information should be in the chat. But I put this slide up because people will watch the recordings. We are watched by people who are in a job search. We are watched by people in HR as well. And both those groups of people want to sort of talk about slightly different contexts of how we can help people. So I think that's the reason that's there. Okay, so I would suggest you get something booked in as soon as possible if you want to have a chat. Any of those aspects we covered on the call are open for discussion. And if you've looked at any of the previous recordings, then that would apply as well. Just a couple of random people, both happen to be guys, but we have a wide, diverse range of clients at Executive Connections, bearing in mind we work in a lot of different locations as well. But just to sort of make the point that what I'm talking to you about here, some of it's like, okay, Steve, where are you coming from? This is all theoretical stuff. It's based around how we work with people and people that are successful after working with us in landing their next role. That's the reason I'm showing you this today. So yeah, it does require a lot of different areas in terms of the approach. And the one thing that people will miss out to point one there is they will not engage in the thought leadership piece, the personal branding piece, the putting themselves out there a bit more on LinkedIn, let's say. It's there as the primary platform to do this. So we may as well, admit that and get involved in it. That they will focus on advertised roles and just networking with recruiters. So they're missing out that third element, that hidden jobs market, the unadvertised jobs market. And unfortunately, really, really missing out by not doing that. So that's one thing I would ask you to take away. And I'd be interested to hear from you as well, whether today or in the future, what you've sort of got out of this particular session, what points have resonated with you, or a single point that's resonated with you. And that's something we can sort of talk about as well. So just a little trailer for next time. We're going to be talking about soft skills next time. Often derided in some ways, but I think over the years it's been accepted. It's become more important as an element of skills required in the workplace. And if you take two people who have been assessed on soft skills but have equal academic and work-based skills, it's the person with the higher emotional intelligence, I guess I'm talking about as well, that will often do better in that place. So that's what we'll be talking about next time anyway. So if you care to join me for that, that would be great. So anyway, look, back in the room. As I said at the outset, I will be happy to cover any particular any particular questions that you want to cover. And my time is yours. We've got about a slightly longer presentation than usual due to the amount of content I had to get through, which is probably why you heard me talking quite quickly. I want to give plenty of time for questions at the end. So, okay. Let's just have a look and see if there are any other messages down here. Yep, the call links are in there. Great stuff. Okay. So I've done a bit of talking. Who wants to ask a question? This is your opportunity. You can see it as a sort of a group coaching opportunity, if you like, but certainly, an opportunity to ask questions. Somebody normally breaks the ice, so don't worry about the silence. I'll just wait until someone does. Is there one takeaway that anyone got from that session that I've just done?
Hi, good morning, Steve. This is Tonya. Hello. The one takeaway that I've got is that you need to invest in both the LinkedIn profile as well as the CV. I have put a lot of time into the CV, but my LinkedIn profile it needs work without a doubt.
Understand. Understand.
So,
Yeah.
I,
More than happy to chat about that. I think it's people have different views. I've often done surveys saying, is the CV dead? Is LinkedIn totally where it's at now? And that's usually almost like a 50-50 result when you do that kind of poll. But certainly, yeah, the profile is one thing, but it's then what activities you undertake following having a nicely optimized profile. That's what can really make the difference. So yeah, more than happy to have a proper chat to you about that. Let's have a look. Yeah, so just a question about networking being daunting, especially for introverts. And I think that, well, maybe, the fact that we can do a lot of things on video now to any other introverts, has that made it easier, or does that make it more difficult that you're kind of having to do a lot of things on camera now? You're attending sort of big group events, and a lot of networking is done in that way. But I think that in terms of, if you want to build relationships with key players, yes, then I would say that you have to go through a process of identifying who you want to talk to, connect who you want to talk to, identify them, connect with them on LinkedIn, but then don't just connect. Once you're connected, have a think about what you're going to do afterwards. Because the ideal thing, remember I said about asking questions as networking, that can really work well. If you can get in front of somebody and see it as a meeting of minds. Don't see them as being here and you being here. It's about a meeting of minds. If you have a networking conversation because you've expressed that you really like the organization the person works for, or you read about a recent acquisition the company has made, or some change in direction for the organization, it would be great to hear a bit about that. What can you then bring to the table during that conversation? You can express that in that message as well, and then keep that going. If you don't get a reply, maybe do another one straight after. Don't just give up straight away. It's another good reason to have a spreadsheet or a free CRM just to track that kind of activity. But yeah, there's no, if you're an introvert, depends where you're on the scale. There's no easy answer to that, but I would say that just make sure you connect regularly, request a networking conversation, or if that's not going to happen, get a little exchange of messages going, keep following the person, keep liking and even commenting on their posts as well. It's all ways of getting more sort of touch points with that individual that you may be trying to have a networking conversation with. Why are you doing it in the first place? Presumably because you like the organization. It's kind of a modern version of doing a speculative approach, isn't it? Just requires a bit more work and a little bit more planning. Okay, thanks for that question. And just for David talking about long careers, or I know something about that. um, yeah. Okay. Is that in the absence that there are no notable deliverables within the last 15 years? It's kind of part of the question there. But as you make that particular point, my mind goes straight away to CVs, and when recruiters and headhunters that we know say that, they don't tend to look too closely at anything after 10 years. So I think it really depends on the detail of what you're talking about. And you're more than welcome to drop me a DM on LinkedIn or pop me an email. If having a one-to-one call, as you know, on the links up the page, if that's not kind of relevant for you, then feel free to just drop me an email or a DM with a little bit more detail. But it depends. Some people in your situation, maybe they were in a corporate that time ago and they went down the consultancy or independent route, So whilst they've got achievements, the ones they think are the big knockout punches are further down the line in terms of time. So yeah, I think that, remember what I said about after 10 years, maybe they don't look at things that closely. So that's just something to sort of bear in mind. I think they're relevant, but it's just a question of if you're up against other candidates where their equivalent of what you're referring to there are 6 months ago, a year ago, then, and you were the hiring manager or you were the recruiter, what would you think? So there's a discussion to be had there, I think. The flip side to that is, without making it sound like it's all or nothing, is that what's happened in the most recent 15 years and what can be brought out there to be significant achievements that you can be proud of and that you can articulate the value you brought to whatever that situation was, and really push those points as well. The only other point is it depends on what your direction is, where you want to go. Is it that you want to go back to what you were doing 15 years ago, and is the most recent 15 years really different from that? Or is it related in some way that could be applied to the next position? So a lot of hypotheticals, sorry, but drop me a message or we can have a proper chat. That's totally up to you. But thanks for the question. We've still got a little bit more time. This is your opportunity. It could be CVs, it could be LinkedIn, it could be job interviews. Thank you, Graham. Have a good day. It could be anything. I've even had people talk to me about ageism. So, there's all sorts of subjects that people may want to talk about in a forum like this. Thank you, Tanae. All right, guys, if there are no further questions, we'll draw a line under it there. Remember to review the recording and just sort of, focus in on how you can develop, how you can grow any of those assets that we talked about, really, that really apply in your own case. And I'm always there to talk about anything on a sort of personal, more tailored sort of one-to-one basis. So bear that in mind. And perhaps I'll see you next week as well. All right. So all the best, everyone. Take care and have a good day ahead.
There's a question.
Oh, hello.
There's another question.
Hi there. Yes, that's my colleague Dorcas just pointing out before I got off there. Yes, okay. Agencies. So to me, it depends. Yeah, I think senior IT roles, it's very much around the top 10. People will tend to look at all sorts of different providers. You've got your Heidrick and Struggles, your Russell Reynolds, Spencer Stewart, the top 10 sort of big. It's best to speak to these guys, I think, in many instances. Having said that, there is always going to be someone who's worked at that kind of organization and has gone off and is doing their own doing their own thing. But what I'd say, I'll do a little bit of digging for you as well. So drop me a DM, if you will, David, on LinkedIn, because also we've worked with people in your line as well. So this is where something that we do is put people together. So more than happy to have a look at that for you. So maybe drop me a DM and I'll reply to you on a more personal sort of basis. Thanks for that. And thanks, Dorcas, for noticing as well. No problem, David. Yeah, I look forward to hearing from you as well. So, okay, guys, no more. I'll be around throughout the day on LinkedIn anyway. So if anyone drops me a message on there, I'll be able to get back to you pretty swiftly. So yeah, all the very best. And thanks for attending. Review the recording. Hope you get something out of that. And perhaps I'll see you next week. All right. All the best, guys. Thank you.